One tiny strait of water, just 34 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, controls whether Japan gets fuel tomorrow or faces blackouts. One drone strike, one insurance company's decision, one shipping lane clogged, and suddenly the price of everything, from gasoline to groceries, spikes across the planet. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how a strip of water most people can't find on a map has the power to dictate global inflation, crash Asian economies, and hold the world's supply chains hostage. And it's not about who wins the military fight, it's about the math. This is the anatomy of a global choke point. Here's what most people don't realize about the Strait of Hormuz. It looks huge on a map, but it's actually a trap. Think of it like this. Imagine a river. Yes, the river is wide, but the deep part of that river, the part where you can actually navigate a massive ship, is narrow. You can see the shallow areas. You know they're there. Your captain knows they're there. And steering a supertanker through shallow water doesn't work. These ships draw 15 meters of water. They weigh 300,000 tons. They can't bottom out. They won't fit. This is exactly what happens in the Strait of Hormuz. The strait has two shipping lanes, one coming in, one going out. Each lane is only 2 miles wide. Between them is a 2-mile buffer zone. That's it. That's your highway for the world's oil. And here's the trap. Because of how the ocean floor is shaped, the underwater geography, the ridges and channels and shallow zones, these deep channels run right through the territorial waters of Oman and Iran. Ships can't swerve around it. They can't take a detour. There's no alternate route when you're piloting a supertanker the size of a small city. You go through those 2 narrow lanes or you don't go at all. This is basic geography, and geography is destiny. So how much oil are we talking about? 20 million barrels of crude oil move through that strait every single day. That's roughly 1/5 of everything the entire world consumes in liquid petroleum. 1/5. To put this in perspective, imagine your city gets its electricity from 5 power plants. One of those plants produces 20% of all your power. Now imagine that one plant suddenly goes offline. Not because it's broken, but because the supply line feeding it gets cut off. What happens to your city? Blackouts, rolling outages, hospitals switch to backup generators, traffic lights malfunction. The whole system wobbles. That's what the strait represents to Asia. Japan imports 94% of its crude from abroad. South Korea depends on imported oil for nearly everything. Singapore, Thailand, the Philippines. All of Southeast Asia is functionally addicted to Middle Eastern crude flowing through that 34-kilometer bottleneck. When you close the Strait of Hormuz, you're not squeezing the United States, you're cutting oxygen to Asia's entire economy. Factories stop running, power grids get unstable, shipping companies panic, and within hours, financial markets start pricing in the chaos. This is what makes it a choke point. Not just that the lane is narrow, but that 1/5 of the world's oil consumption depends entirely on keeping those 2 lanes open. Here's a mechanism most people have no idea exists. A strait doesn't need battleships or sea mines to be closed. It can be closed by math. Specifically, insurance math. Here's the analogy. Imagine you own a house in a safe neighborhood. Your home insurance is affordable, maybe $1,200 a year. Then, a series of fires break out in your area. Arson, multiple attacks. Insurance companies reassess the risk. Suddenly, they're not just raising your premium slightly, they're tripling it to $4,000 a year. Or they're saying, actually, we're not insuring houses in this neighborhood anymore. At all. When a vessel gets hit by a drone, when a ship gets damaged, when military risk in a region spikes, something happens in London. Lloyd's of London, the institution that's been underwriting maritime insurance for centuries, instantly reclassifies the zone. The strait goes from normal shipping risk to active conflict zone, and when that happens, War risk insurance premiums don't just increase, they explode. A single transit through the strait can see insurance premiums jump by hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes $1 million or more on a single trip. Some shipping companies get quotes that are so high, the insurance becomes economically impossible. The syndicates simply revoke coverage entirely. Here's the critical part. A commercial shipping company cannot legally operate a vessel without insurance. They cannot. If a ship loses insurance, it's not allowed to leave port. The risk of losing a $150 million hull and $100 million in cargo means the math alone stops the ship before the military ever needs to. This is the invisible blockade. No one sees the warships, no one sees the mines, but the ships don't move anyway because the numbers don't work. One drone strike, one insurance adjustment, thousands of ships sitting idle. The oil doesn't flow. The obvious question, why don't they just use pipelines? Why not pump the oil around the strait? This is where people think there's an easy solution. There isn't. Think of it like this. Your house gets water from the main municipal pipeline. That pipe is big. It can handle the volume your neighborhood needs. Now the main line breaks. So you decide to reroute water through smaller pipes, like your garden hose and a few neighbors' hoses connected together. Yes, some water flows, but not enough, not even close. You've got maybe 30% of your normal water supply. 70% is just gone. People are dry. Toilets aren't flushing. Gardens are dead. This is the reality of pipeline bypasses for oil. Yes, there are alternative pipelines. The Saudi East-West pipeline can route oil to the Red Sea. There's an Abu Dhabi pipeline system that can send crude to Fujairah. There are ongoing restoration projects through Iraq and Syria that might add capacity someday. But here's the math. Even if every single alternative pipeline on Earth ran at absolute maximum capacity, 100% mechanical efficiency, never breaking down, never interrupted, they can handle only a fraction of the 20 million barrels that normally flow through the strait. The Saudi pipeline system can handle roughly 5 million barrels per day. The Abu Dhabi routes add a few million more. But that still leaves a gap. A massive gap. Roughly 10 to 12 million barrels with nowhere to go. That oil doesn't just disappear from the market. That supply deficit has to go somewhere. It drives prices up. It forces buyers to compete for scarce barrels. It cascades through every petrochemical industry, every airline, every factory dependent on energy. There is no bypass that can replace the strait. Not today, probably not for decades. The physics and the infrastructure just don't exist. Now, I need to pause here and talk to you directly. If you're watching and you've learned something from understanding how these systems actually work, I'd genuinely appreciate if you hit the like button. Subscribe if you want to keep understanding the mechanisms behind global chaos, and drop a comment if you've got questions. I read them all. The reason I emphasize this is simple. Most people consume news without understanding the infrastructure underneath. They see headlines about the Middle East and they think geopolitics. They don't see the supertankers. They don't see the insurance syndicates. They don't see the pipeline bottleneck. When you understand the mechanism, you understand why events halfway across the world actually matter to your life. So I'm asking you to help spread that understanding, because the algorithm rewards engagement, and engagement means this channel can keep doing deep dives into the systems you actually depend on. Back to the strait. So here's what you now understand. 1. Geography creates a physical bottleneck. 2. Narrow shipping lanes. No alternatives. No swerving. The ocean floor dictates where ships can safely travel. 2. Those lanes carry 1/5 of the world's oil, nearly all destined for Asia. Close the lanes, and you don't hurt Western oil markets. You cripple Asian economies instantly. 3. Even if the military wanted to keep the lanes open, insurance markets can close them first. One attack, one insurance adjustment, and the ships stop moving without anyone firing another shot. 4. There are no realistic bypass pipelines. The alternatives can't absorb the volume. The missing barrels create an immediate, irreplaceable supply gap. This is why a 34-kilometer strip of water can dictate whether energy prices spike or crash. This is why geopolitical tension in the Middle East instantly translates to economic anxiety in Tokyo and Seoul. This is why shipping companies hold their breath every time regional military tensions escalate. The Strait of Hormuz isn't just a shipping lane, it's a valve. And when that valve gets squeezed, the entire global system feels the pressure. When traffic slows from 100 transits a day to single digits, which has happened multiple times, Brent crude futures move violently. Shipping costs spike. Supply chain delays cascade. Companies holding inventory suddenly can't replace it. Prices spike for consumers. Your grocery bill goes up. Your gas tank costs more to fill. All because a 34-kilometer choke point got clogged. This happened in 2019. This happened in 2022. This is happening right now as tensions escalate. And here's the mechanical reality. There's no quick fix. You can't build a pipeline overnight. You can't widen shipping lanes by decree. You can't force insurance companies to underwrite risk they've priced as unacceptable. The system is what it is. Geography is destiny. And destiny, in this case, is concentrated in one narrow strait. This is what global chaos actually looks like when you pull back the curtain. Not dramatic headlines, just math, physics, infrastructure, and the terrifying fragility of a system that depends on one choke point staying open. Now that you understand the strait, you're ready for what comes next. Because every single week, we tackle the complex topics you've been wondering about and decode what actually is happening behind the headlines. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one.